Hey everyone, welcome to the Andy Kang Show. I'm your host, Andy Kang. And today we'll be talking about some serious international drama. So we're talking about the latest global hotspots, Venezuela's total meltdown, Iran's explosive protest, and the bizarre tug-of-war over Greenland. These aren't just far-off stories, they're shaking up oil prices, global trades, alliances, and even the planet's future. Think of it as a geopolitical thriller where Trump is the wild card protagonist. If you're loving this edge of your seats analysis, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Let's dive in. Picture this: it's early January 2026, and the US pulls off a Hollywood-style raid in Caracas. Boom! Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife are captured into the dead of night, whisked away to New York for a courtroom showdown on drug trafficking and weapon charges. Trump declares the U.S. is basically running Venezuela for now until things stabilize. Fast forward a couple weeks, and U.S. forces are seizing oil tankers left and right, like the Russian-flagged Marinera in the North Atlantic. They've imposed a full blockade on Venezuelan oil exports, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio's outlining a plan to sell off 30 to 50 million barrels of seized crude, with the U.S. calling the shots on where the money goes. Venezuela's oil industry is a wreck. Productions plummeted from 3.5 million barrels a day back in the 90s to under a million now, thanks to mismanagement, sanctions, and zero investment. Rebuilding could take hundreds of billions and years, but Trump's inviting American companies like Chevron to swoop in and fix. Critics are screaming about international law violations, while Russia calling it a gross violation of maritime rules. Venezuela's interim leader, Delcy Rodriguez, is holding the fort, but the country is in limbo. Joy in the streets from opposition folks, but fear of chaos too. Now shift scenes to Iran, where protests have turned into a full-blown crisis. Since early January 2026, massive anti-government demos have rocked the country, sparked by economic woes like 40% plus inflation and a crash in currency. The government's crackdown, brutal. Activists say anywhere from 600 to 2,500 people killed, thousands arrested, and the internet blackout that's lasted days. Trump jumps in with threats of military strikes if the killings don't stop, but by mid-January he says he's been told the killing has stopped. And executions like for protesters Arfan Sultani are off the table. Instead of bombs, he's wielding his favorite weapon, tariffs. A 25% slam on any country doing the business with Iran, aimed at squeezing Iran's cash flow and punishing partners like China, who buys most of Iran's oil. Iran's denied execution plans reopened airspace briefly and pledged some economic reforms, but tensions are sky high. The Strait of Hormuz, that choke point for 20% of global oil, is on everyone's radar. If it gets blocked, oil prices could explode. China's already threatening retaliation, and the U.S. has rolled out new sanctions on Iranian officials tied to the crackdown. It's a power keg, with the world watching if this spiraled into something bigger. And then there's Greenland. Yeah, the massive icy island that's suddenly the start of a territorial soap opera. Trump revives his old obsession in January 2026, saying the U.S. needs Greenland for national security to counter Russia and China, even though neither's made a move. It's got the world's biggest untapped rare earth minerals, stuff like lithium and graphite that's crucial for EVs, AI, and defense tech. Estimates say up to 36 million tons of resources, enough to break China's monopoly. On January 14, high-stakes talks at the White House between U.S. VP J.D. Vance, Secretary Rubio, Denmark's Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen, and Greenland's Vivian Motzfeldt ends with nada major. They agreed to working groups for more checks, but Denmark's blunt. There is a fundamental disagreement. Greenlanders are freaking out. Locals like Carl Sandgreen hope for humanity in the talks, fearing a U.S. takeover ignores their autonomy. Meanwhile, European countries are sending tiny troops contingents. Germany with 13, Norway 2, UK 1 to boost Arctic security amid NATO discussions. Climate change is melting the ice faster than expected, opening new shipping routes, but also raising sea level globally. Trump's not backing down, hinting at military options if needed, while Denmark insists Greenland's not for sale. So how do these hotspots rip out to the world? First, energy chaos. Venezuela's oil takeover and Iran's turmoil could spike spices. Brent cruise already dipped to $63, but could surge if supplies tighten. We're talking about higher gas bills, inflation hits, and economic pains for oil-dependent nations. Geopolitically, in U.S. unilateralism and steroid, alienating allies like Denmark, poking bears like Russia and China, and risking escalations in Arctic or Middle East. Trade wars from those 25% tariffs, China and Indian big red buyers could face billions in costs. Slowing global growth on the green side, Greenland's melt is a climate red flag. Faster thawing means rising seas, disrupted weather, and scramble for Arctic resources that could spark new conflicts. Overall, it's testing alliances, boosting U.S. influence in resources, but at the cost of international norms. It is the new world order or a recipe for blowback. Wrapping up this episode, folks, these stories show how one leader's move can reshape the globe, from oil grabs in Venezuela to tariffs threats in Iran and Arctic showdown over Greenland. 2026 off to an explosive start. What do you think happens next? Drop your takes in the comments. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time on the Andy Kang Show. Peace out.